15 years earlier, the world had been different. Some say it was a kinder and slower place. Others say it was harsh and cruel. To Dr. Ken Hayabusa, an American-born Japanese archaeologist, it was simply the most exciting time to be alive. His wife had given birth to a handsome, healthy son, and he had finally begun the expedition of his career. The one that was sure to win him worldwide recognition in his field. He was beyond happy. He awoke each day practically exploding with joy. Although he knew his trek might be dangerous, he had taken all the necessary precautions. How could he have known that his precautions were in vain? How could he have possibly known the bizarre fate that awaited him? "Randolph, you are a wimp!" Ken Hayabusa bounded through the dense brush of the Amazon jungle. Overhead, the noon sun was a fireball that seemed to lick his skin with its flames. The humidity clung to him. Tropical insects hovered in thick swarms across his face, and low-hanging branches whipped him at every turn. But he barely noticed any of it. They were almost there. He paused a moment, adjusted his backpack and sword belt. He remembered how his colleagues had laughed when he insisted on taking the sword. No matter. Not even the most up-to-date ammunition made him feel as safe as his sword. It was an old and trusted friend. And in times of need, friends never let you down. "Randolph," he called out again, "have I lost you, old fellow?" Several yards behind him, an overweight, bearded man stumbled through a greenish-yellow thicket. He crashed to the ground, sending the contents of his backpack sprawling. "I don't know why I ever agreed to go along with this crack-brained scheme," he mumbled. Dr. Hayabusa sprinted over to help him up. "For the pursuit of knowledge, my friend," he said with a laugh. "Surely this can't be the Dr. Randolph Wimple, shining star of the University of Peru Archaeology Department." "Spare me the guilt trip, Ken," Dr. Wimple replied. "Can't we just sit for a minute? You may be a black belt ninja, my friend, but I'm an ordinary human. The ruins have been there for hundreds of years. They'll be exactly the same, whether we get there now or 5 hours from now." "Yes, but my sun is changing by the minute," Dr. Hayabusa said, pacing anxiously. "I can't wait to return to my family with the news of our great success, Randolph." Dr. Wimple signed. "Just my luck to get stuck with a romantic sap. All right, if we must hurry, so be it. Just be careful, you know the dangers." Of course he did. Every archaeologist knew them. Of the 29 explorers who had ever tried to reach the ruins, none had ever returned. No bodies had even been found. No one knew what was inside the ruins. There were rumors of dragons and monsters, but those were never taken seriously. One thing was clear, though. Whatever was there must be of great historical importance. And awesome power. "Demons, eh, Randolph?" Dr. Hayabusa chuckled. "You're afraid of some drooling, fire-breathing monster who's going to gobble us down, is that it?" "Well, no, I was just saying that. Don't forget, Randolph, this is the late 20th century," he resumed his pacing. "None of the other explorers had the sophisticated tracking devices we have, the weaponry, the communication setup." "Yes, and the space-age technology like your sword," Dr. Wimple said dryly. "A cheap shot, Randolph! You know that—" Before he could say another word, Dr. Hayabusa disappeared into the ground. "Ken!" Dr. Wimple exclaimed. He rushed to the hole where his colleague had been standing. "Randolph?" came a muffled voice from within the hole. "What do you suppose a bear trap would be doing in the middle of a tropical jungle?" Dr. Wimple put his hand to his mouth. "Oh dear!" He reached down and pulled his colleague out. "Were you caught in it?" Dr. Hayabusa said, dusting himself off. "No, I was saved by several decades of rust. Trap wouldn't close." "Well, I suppose we must be getting near our site," Dr. Wimple said. "Someone is trying to protect it." "Was trying to protect it, Randolph," Dr. Hayabusa corrected. "Judging from that trap, it looks like they may have given up years ago." "Lucky for us, I suppose." "You see," Dr. Hayabusa said, heading back into the woods, "we have nothing to fear." Grrrr! Dr. Hayabusa swallowed his last word. There was a lizard in his path. But this was not a cute little slithery pest. It was 6 feet long and angry, and its enormous teeth glinted in the sun as they lunged at Dr. Hayabusa's face. Dr. Hayabusa leapt out of the monster's path. He fell to the ground. Scrambling to his feet, he unsheathed his sword. The beast stared at him. Its eyes rolled about on either side of its face. Its short, stocky legs stuck out of the side of its scaly body and curved down, like a person at the top of a push-up. Slowly, as it approached, letting out a fearsome hiss. "Spirit, Ken!" Dr. Wimple cried out. Dr. Hayabusa walked backward. He held his sword steady. "Come this way, Randolph. Walk slowly. It won't harm us. It needs to conserve its energy." Dr. Wimple obeyed. "How can you possibly know that?" "The creature is a Komodo dragon, Randolph. Until now, it has only been found on the Indonesian island of Komodo, having somehow survived extinction. As a cold-blooded reptile, it often sleeps in the sunlight, replenishing its energy. You can see this one is a bit sluggish. At night, it will undoubtedly be quick and ferocious." "Thank you," Dr. Wimple said, trembling. "I shall make sure not to be around here after dark." "But what a zoological find! The first of its kind discovered in the West!" Dr. Wimple nodded. "Fine. We'll write up a report. Let's get out of here before we become its lunch." They took off, scampering deeper into the jungle. The trees grew closer together, the brush thicker and thornier. Dr. Hayabusa used his sword to cut a path. They bushwhacked for hours. Under the afternoon sun, the jungle festered. The humidity practically suffocated them, and they had to stop every few feet to catch their breaths. Even Dr. Hayabusa was running out of steam. When they reached a clearing, Dr. Wimple flopped onto the ground. "Siesta time," he said. "I don't care what you say." Dr. Hayabusa took a map out of his pocket. He studied it carefully. "If I'm not mistaken, Randolph, we are already at the... Ken, look!" Dr. Wimple shouted. Suddenly his fatigue disappeared. He ran across the clearing to a strange rounded stone that stuck out of the ground. Pulling a spade out of his pocket, Dr. Wimple furiously dug around the stone. It was a large, flat tablet covered in intricate etchings. Dr. Hayabusa joined his colleague, and they together pulled out the tablet. They set it down, and Dr. Hayabusa began to translate. "All praise the great hero Shinobi, who, on this day, in Anno Domini 1290, confronted the powerful demon of the Temple of Darkness." "Shinobi?" Dr. Wimple interrupted. "It's impossible! How could a Japanese be in the Amazon 200 years before Columbus?" His eyes aglow. Dr. Hayabusa read on. "Having sailed across the eternal sea to the land of forbidden mystery, Shinobi returned to his native land, guarding the secret of his discovery." "Eureka!" Dr. Wimple shouted. "Do you realize what a find we've made? My associates can carbon date it to make sure it's not a fake, and the great Shinobi cannot bear to reveal the one shame of his life," Dr. Hayabusa continued reading. "His only failure as a warrior. When the demon's body lay bloodless on the ground, slain by Shinobi's sword, its power lived on. It continued the fight, unleashing the forces of nature. Though Shinobi could not beat this invisible enemy, he fought bravely, dividing the demon's energy in two, the forces of light and dark. Thus disabling the demon, he imprisoned the forces into two statues, buried here under." Without saying another word, the two scientists dropped to their knees and began digging. It took over an hour, but when their shovels hit two solid objects, they were delirious with excitement. Dr. Hayabusa pulled out a white marble figurine, about a foot tall and shaped like a horrible hunched dragon. Dr. Wimple's statue was exactly the same, except made of black onyx. "Remarkable!" Dr. Wimple said in an awed whisper. "Does the tablet explain what happened to their power?" Dr. Hayabusa picked up the tablet and read more. "The demon will begin to awake at the time of the dark moon, approximately every 700 years. If the statues are in the same temple as the demon, they will join forces and inhabit the demon's body, releasing unimaginable power. The world will not survive. If the statues are not inside the temple, the demon will remain harmless." Dr. Hayabusa paused. His face was solemn. "Is that it?" Dr. Wimple asked. "Yes." Dr. Hayabusa looked his friend in the eye. "The question is, where is the temple?" Dr. Wimple threw back his head in laughter. "Surely you don't take all that seriously!" "What do you mean? We did find the statues." "Yes, and they're fine examples of pre-Columbian South American art, but it's obvious what happened here. Clearly Shinobi's demon was a Komodo dragon, an ancestor of the one we found. The rest, the pagan mumbo-jumbo, we should leave to the folklore experts." Dr. Wimple took off his pack and stuffed the statues in. Then he walked into the surrounding jungle, snooping around. But Dr. Hayabusa wasn't convinced. He paced the edge of the clearing, trying to piece it all together. His toe stubbed against the edge of another stone. Gritting his teeth, he looked down at it. It was gold, and it looked like the edge of something bigger. He knelt down and yanked the underbrush off its surface. When he was done, a small, perfectly square stone stared up at him. On it were gold inlays depicting some kind of message. "Amazing!" he called out. "I found an ancient grave marker, Randolph!" No answer. Dr. Hayabusa turned around. "Randolph?" He walked across the clearing, looking around. "Randolph? Where did you go?" Crack! He stopped. That wasn't a jungle sound. Randolph Wimple must have found something in the woods. But where? In the thick air, it was hard to tell where the noise came from. He felt his blood froze. The sound was in the clearing, behind him. He whipped around. Everything looked exactly the same. Or did it? Crank! It was the grave marker. His trained eyes detected a slight movement. An inner voice told him, begged him to run away. But Dr. Hayabusa walked closer. Skrunk! The marker slid aside, revealing a deep hole. And 2 arms. A sudden blinding lightning bolt ripped the jungle air. It flashed in front of Dr. Hayabusa and sliced a nearby tree in half. Dr. Hayabusa flung himself onto the ground. When he turned around, his jaw dropped open. Standing in front of him was a creature. It was human, but only barely. Each foot had 3 enormous claws. Its bare chest rippled with muscles that looked like cast iron. Deadly sharp ram horns jutted out of the steel mask that covered its face. In its right hand, it held a sword. In its left, a gleaming shield emblazoned with the letter J. And when it spoke, the ground shook. "Give me the statues!" it demanded. "Not on your life, sheepface!" Hayabusa said. The warrior thrust the sword. Its mighty stroke caused the trees to rustle. With a perfect ninja front roll, Dr. Hayabusa escaped the sword. He sprang to his feet. In one swift motion, he pulled his own sword and lunged. Clang! It hit against his enemy's shield. Dr. Hayabusa stepped back, waiting for the next move. The warrior dropped its sword. With a casual but powerful gesture, it reached upward. Dr. Hayabusa watched with eagle eyes. Crack! Another bolt of lightning sliced the sky. This one connected with the warrior's outstretched hand. Dr. Hayabusa stared in disbelief. How could this thing have survived the hit? It brought its arm forward. It pointed. Yeah! Dr. Hayabusa took the full force of the electric current. He crumbled to the ground. A freak storm! Came the voice from behind him. Oh, maybe there'll be a break in the humidity. Out of the corner of his eye, Dr. Hayabusa saw Randolph Wimple emerge from the surrounding brush. He propped himself up on his weakened elbows. Run! He croaked, his voice raw. Dr. Wimple froze in his tracks. He looked from Dr. Hayabusa to the warrior. Ken! Who? What? Run for your life! Dr. Hayabusa croaked. And follow every step of Emergency Plan F! Do you understand? But I can't just leave you! Dr. Wimple was cut off by another electric jolt. It drilled cleaned a hole through the tree next to him. Dr. Wimple was off in a flash. He had never run so fast in his life. Good riddance, the warrior snarled. Now give me the statues! Never! Dr. Hayabusa said. By now, Dr. Wimple would be 50 yards away. With both statues. Zit! Another jolt made Hayabusa arch in pain. All right, he said. At least leave me with enough strength to open my pack. The warrior waited. With agonized slowness, Dr. Hayabusa removed his backpack. The longer he took, the farther Dr. Wimple would travel. He set the pack down. He fumbled with the laces. He removed his canteen from the top. He dumped the contents onto the ground. Trail mix, 3 maps, a wallet, a camera, 2 lenses, a mess kit, and a compass. Nothing more. The warrior seemed to swell with rage. Veins strained at its chest muscles. With its fists clenched, it reached up into the sky. A deafening boom shook the entire jungle. The lightning that struck the warrior's hand bathed the area in white light. When the flash was over, the warrior glowed. No one plays games with me, foolish insect! It bellowed. Prepare to meet a fate more unimaginably terrible than death! Randolph Wimple was sick with guilt. But that wasn't all. He limped from a twisted ankle. His pants were ripped from a thorny bush, his hair matted with sweat. From head to toe he was covered in dirt. As he stumbled into the hotel at the edge of the jungle, people avoided him. The hotel lobby was stuffy and hot. A worker stood on a high ladder in the center, replacing a light bulb on a ceiling fan that wasn't working. I left him to die. That was the only thought running through Dr. Wimple's head. It repeated itself over and over again. He didn't know how he could live with it. Hobbling across the lobby, he reached a bank of telephone booths. He tried to enter one, but his backpack wouldn't fit. He took the pack off and put it on the floor, making sure to wrap the shoulder harnesses around his ankle, just in case. Plan F, he muttered, fumbling in his pocket for change. What was Plan F? His fingers shook as he deposited his coins in the phone. It seemed to take forever, but his secretary finally answered. Ellie? Wimple here. Listen closely. You've got to send... What? No, Ellie, I won't be making the faculty seminar on Monday. I don't even know if I'll be alive on Monday. A twinge of pain shot up his leg. Must be the twisted ankle, he assumed. He had shifted his weight to the other foot. He looked down to check the backpack. It was gone. There was a clattering of footsteps across the lobby's linoleum floor. 2 men in white shirts were running away. One of them held the pack. Dr. Wimple dropped the phone receiver. He raced across the lobby. His exhaustion was gone, and he could barely feel his feet touch the ground. It took about 5 steps for his ankle to give out. Yeah! Dr. Wimple flailed his arms, grabbing the ladder for support. At the top, the worker windmilled his arms, trying to keep his balance. A light bulb flew out of his hand. Pach! The bulb exploded on the floor, sounding like a pistol shot. Startled, the 2 thugs jumped. They dove to the floor. At the same time, Dr. Wimple collapsed in pain. He landed in a heap, his outstretched arms inches from the backpack. The thugs lunged. Dr. Wimple grabbed. "Give me that," Dr. Wimple said, desperately clinging to his pack. The thugs ripped open the top. One of them reached inside, the other pushed Dr. Wimple. But not before Dr. Wimple had his hands inside the pack. His fingers closed around something smooth and heavy. He hoped it was a statue. "Ah!" cried one of the thugs, shoving Dr. Wimple violently. Dr. Wimple rolled away, pulling out whatever was in his hands. When he stood up, he saw the 2 thieves scrambling out of the doorway with the backpack. He felt his arms being grabbed. "All right, you bum, you're out of here!" came a gruff voice. Dr. Wimple looked to his right and left, into the stern faces of 2 hotel security guards. "Pardon me, senors," he said, "but you have the wrong man!" That was all he could say before he tossed him out the front door. He cried out in excruciating pain as he landed on the well-trampled dirt out front. When the first wave of pain settled down, he looked at his hand. He was gripping so tight that his knuckles were white as the object he was holding. The light statue. It had been the worst day of Dr. Wimple's life. He abandoned his colleague, broken his ankle, been humiliated by hotel guards, and allowed 2 common criminals to steal one of the most valuable relics known to man. But he had one small satisfaction. The 2 statues were separate. They could never end up in the temple together. Not that he really believed the ancient inscription, but you never know.